Um, Here we go. So I'll try to summarize all that a little bit. So just remember that when you hold tension anywhere, it doesn't have to be just about your diaphragm or your abdominal muscles or your pelvic floor, which is kind of the area in the body that we're going to work with today. But anywhere in your body, your neck, your shoulders, anything at all, if we hold tension unconsciously or consciously for great lengths of time. This actually causes weakness, not strength. That we need to learn how to both engage fully and release fully. There's a Rumi quote about that, that a hand held always in a fist, something about that can never be extended open in friendship, that you have to be able to both close and open, to have a greater capacity for fluency in your body and for capacity in your body to be strong and supple and able, and also to learn how to let go and be at ease. So as you close your eyes, think about what that balance really means to you of effort and surrender. There's many well, not many, but there's a few passages in the Yoga Sutra that really lend us to think about that, this balancing act of bringing our full effort into something and then also learning how to let go, is just so important for all aspects of our lives, not just for our muscular health, but for our mental health, for our spiritual health, for our relational health. That balancing these two forces is a life task, a life skill to develop. So as you close your eyes, think about what ways in which you do a really good job in balancing effort and surrender. Maybe you do a really good job of working hard at work and then letting it go when you leave work. Maybe you can do a really good job of having an intense conversation and then releasing. Maybe you're really good at forgiving. Maybe, whatever that strength in you is, let's acknowledge it and appreciate. And then maybe think about ways in which this balancing act of effort and surrender is a little more challenging for you. Do you kind of beat the horse, like do you just keep going with something even though it's not working? Do you hold grudges? Are you one that just feels like if you just worked harder and worked stronger, everything would be better, everything would work out okay? Or maybe you give up very easily and you have a harder time with the efforting, that you have to kind of bring your fullness to something a little bit more. So just notice what that looks like for you. Just like last week when we did a lot of work on balance, balancing the hemispheres, balancing the body. Let's see if we can just get that internal sense of balance. That if we were to balance bringing our full effort to something and also letting go of any expectations or outcomes, what does the balance of that feel like in your heart center and your mind? Is there a state of flow that comes when you sense that balance? And see if you can start to feel this in your breath itself. Notice your posture, adjust anything that needs adjusting, and just start to find your way into the ebb and flow of your breath. Is there, as you notice, just pay attention to how your breathing is. Try not to change much. But as you just acquaint yourself with your breathing, is there any part of the breath that doesn't feel free? Is there anything that interrupts your flow? Is it easier for you to inhale or exhale, or is there evenness to that? Let's begin to pay attention to the actual anatomy of your body. So walk your awareness into your diaphragm. Bring your awareness into your pelvic floor. And just see if you can sense that feeling of mobility, that you're not stuck, that things can move, that we don't have to tense or grip or hold something static, but that really the dance of the breath is all about movement, freedom, learning how to both expand and condense. And then depending on which, whether you're looking at your diaphragm or feeling your way into your pelvic floor, imagine now that you are a cylinder, that your diaphragm is the top, your pelvic floor is the bottom, and your transverse abdominis muscle that wraps from your back around to the front, the sides of your container. And on the in-breath, imagine, filling a balloon or filling up a soft jug of water or anything at all where there's a sense of the container expanding in all fields, above, below, and the sides. And on the exhale, that sense of condensement, where maybe if you're thinking of a balloon, the balloon can shrink in all its dimensions. Maybe your visual is more like an actual container where, water can expand and the sides and the bottom and the top kind of billow out on the in-breath. And then releasing that water where everything condenses and shrinks on the exhale. So choose a medium in your mind that helps you visualize and then feel your way into the interoception of this, the body sensation of the pelvic floor dropping and broadening on the inhale and drawing in and up on the exhale. And same with the actual diaphragm. There's a drawing down and wide on the inhale and a drawing in and up on the exhale. The transverse abdominis releasing and expanding, letting go of its sense of control on the in-breath and then condensing to find the harness of those sides of your cylinder. Maybe your visual is to think of the pelvic floor and the diaphragm doing the same thing, that they both drop down and wide on the inhale and they both drop in and up on the exhale. And even more importantly than the visuals you put in your mind, what are you feeling actually happening? So we know that this is how we're quote unquote supposed to breathe. That our diaphragm is supposed to move and drop down and wide and in and up. But is that actually happening? The diaphragm doesn't have a lot of sensory awareness. There's not a lot of sensory nerves embedded in the diaphragm. So much of what we feel is the mobility around it, the visceral sensations, the feeling of our ribs and the muscles in our rib cage and around our body. Certainly the transverse abdominis has a lot of nerves awareness. So just pay attention to what you're feeling. And see if you can notice if you can stay in the flow, that the constant mobility of these muscular engagements and releases are happening. And inherently, the nature of breath is to not get stuck. The nature of the breath is to move. So that would be the first thing I would look for is where do I feel like I get stuck? When you're ready, bring your hands together at your heart and see what it feels like to just find that balanced, centered place again. Offer an intention. Don't let the breath quiet. Keep it moving. Offer an intention. And then release and relax the hands. Let's find our way onto our back. All right, so as we stretch out in our body, let's remember that the nature of the breath is to move, which means that the nature of the pelvic floor is to move. So, if nothing else, if you notice where you tend to get stuck and quiet and still, maybe when you're concentrating, you hold your breath. Maybe when you're angry or when you're stressed, you hold your breath. You hold your pelvic floor. Start to pay attention to the moments when you sense the pausing of mobility and movement, because that's where we tend to get, that's the rub right there. Okay, so stretch your arms overhead and feel some good movement in your body. Oh, maybe you want to yawn. Just see what your body wants. Stretch one side, stretch the other side, and just enjoy. Okay, maybe roll your wrists a little bit, wiggle your fingers, get your edges to wake up. And then we'll bring our knees into our chest and rock a little bit, swaying from side to side. Nice and gentle, easy. And then let's hold on to the knees and maybe start with tiny little circles. And you can just sense what kind of size circle of your sacral movements you'd like. Sometimes if we immediately swing into the big giant circles of our knees, we miss something. So just notice your sacrum, notice your hips, notice your low back, notice how your breath is moving. And then when you're ready, you can circle the other way. Maybe they're tiny little circles. Maybe they're bigger circles. Try not to just automatically go to the big swing. Sometimes if we can enhance our capacity to feel in smaller ranges of motion or more subtle actions of the body, we can train ourselves to pay attention to these subtle ways that we restrict the breath. Okay? A lot of the pelvic floor and breathing apparatus in our body, we don't notice it a lot because it is so automatic. So sometimes slowing down, going smaller, bringing that awareness is a good thing. Let's open up our knees away from the midline and bring them back in. And again, you don't have to go to your biggest range of motion in your hip joints right away. Maybe you want to kind of explore some smaller circles and then work your way a little bigger and just notice, is there a place where things get a little messy? Is there a hip joint that is a little tender, or do you kind of adjust and move your pelvis around to accommodate some tightness somewhere? And then let's hug the right knee into your chest, left leg long on the ground, and move around in your ankles. And same, maybe you start with just small little wiggles of your toes and then get progressively bigger in your movements. A nice good squeeze of that knee. How's your breath doing? We haven't mentioned it in a little bit here. So how's the breath feeling? See if you can just keep bringing yourself back to the breath. Let's twist here. Drop that right knee over to the left a little bit and open up. And again, it doesn't have to be your biggest, baddest thing. Just see what's available here. And as you twist, notice what the breath is doing. Is there mobility here? Is there a capacity for movement of your breathing? What changes your breath by the changing shape of your body? And then bring that knee back in. Let's take a deep breath. And as you exhale, squeeze your knee in, pick up your head, a snug tug. And then relax and put that foot on the ground. And let's change sides. Left knee into your chest and right leg long on the ground. And notice the movement of your ankles and your feet again. Wiggle your toes. Notice if your pelvis is doing weird things, if bringing your knee in makes you kind of shift anything. See if you can keep even across your hips. Relax the base of your skull, soften your shoulders. And then we'll cross that left knee over to the right and notice what's happening in your breath as you do this. Does it suddenly, are you inspired to take a deeper inspiration? And opening your chest in this way, does it kind of encourage a deeper breath? And then relax and bring yourself back. Bring your feet onto the floor. Find that neutral pelvis again. Feet hip width or maybe a teeny wider, your choice. And then let's rub the cicada wings. So drop that knee and slide it down the inner shin of the other leg and then switch. And just a nice little slide and glide of the knee against the inner shin, down and back up again. And just imagine the sense that your hips and your pelvic floor have a relationship, because they do. So notice as you internally rotate the femur bones, how does the pelvic floor feel? Does it give a sense of softness to the pelvic floor? How about your diaphragm? Are you able to breathe well here? Is there something soothing about this that gives way to the breath? And then release and put your feet onto the ground again. Let's grab our feet, happy baby pose. You can always hold behind your knees. Have a little moment of rocking if you'd like. Let your back kind of open up into this pose. Kind of just check and see how much this pose wants to open in your body. Maybe once your low back gets a little settled, notice the pelvic floor, that broadening of widening of the sit bones. Release any tension through your head. Take a deep breath and notice what happens through the diaphragm with that compression of your knees close by, what happens in the pelvic floor. All right, and put the left foot down onto the ground and put your right foot on top of your left knee. And maybe pick that knee up a little bit, the left knee up, and try to have mobility. So we're not going into a deep stretch right now, but we're mobilizing the hips. So maybe some circling of the hips while you're in that reverse pigeon position. And then release that foot down and let's switch sides. Put your left foot on your right knee and then pick up that right knee a little closer. Hold wherever you want. I'm holding my foot, my left foot and my left knee. So just kind of hold wherever's comfortable and do some hip circles. So just have some mobility within this rotation. Even though our femur bone is externally rotated and a little abducted, what we want is some movement. All right, and then relax that. And take the soles of your feet together and take your fists or maybe even some blocks and stick them underneath the outer hips a little bit so you have a little support. And then just notice in the Supta Baddha Konasana as you let your knees drape down toward the sides and open up, what's available here? Do you need that much fist underneath you? Can you start to slide your hands a little further out? And what's happening? Are the two hips the same? Are they not the same? Do you have any tension here? How is your breath? Can you feel yourself breathe into the pelvic floor? Is your belly moving when you breathe in and out? And then relax that. Let's knock our knees together. Take your feet wide and just release through the through the outer hips a little bit. Okay, so now to wake up our pelvic floor a little bit, we need a block. So grab a block. and stick it between your knees. You can have it at the narrow width of the block. Maybe you feel more comfortable with the middle width of the block, kind of experiment with what feels more natural to you. It kind of depends on how your body's made. Okay, so ground the four corners of your feet. Try to sense that your feet are even to each other. And we're just going to very gently hug the block on the exhales. This is our opportunity to incorporate our breathing into what we're doing. And then release the block on the inhales. So try to coordinate with the breaths. Be patient with this. So I know you probably are itchy to get up and move, and we will. But let's just see what it feels like to take a few moments to just find that relationship of breath, diaphragm, pelvic floor. As you inhale, relax the belly, diaphragm, and pelvic floor. And as you exhale, hug the block, draw the navel down, feel that transverse abdominis kind of kick into gear a little bit. And now, after a couple rounds of just figuring out the block movement and the breath, we'll add the feet into this. So as you hug the block on the exhale, we're going to keep the outer feet engaged on the ground. And then as you release the block, see if you can keep the inner feet engaged on the ground. Okay, so subtle. This is small little things. A lot of times when we hug the block, we want to internally rotate, which will make our big toe side of the foot press down further and our outer side of the foot loosen its grip. So let's keep that grip so that we're flourishing in the fullness of our transverse abdominis and not just over relying on the very strong inner thigh muscles to do all the work. So a lot of times we can think that we're using our pelvic floor, but really all we're doing is gripping our adductors, our inner thigh muscles. So see if you can kind of keep them just slightly braked a little bit by keeping those outer feet engaged so that the engagement really, the awareness and the engagement really lands in the pelvic floor and in the transverse abdominis. So always remember, when we lift our pelvic floor muscles, we're not lifting heavy weights. Think of like drawing a tissue out of a tissue box. That amount of effort of kind of pulling a tissue with your hand out of a tissue box. So as our pelvic floor relaxes and expands, we drop the tissue. And as we engage the pelvic floor and draw our pelvic floor in and up on the exhale, squeezing the block outer feet, then it's just the pressure of the tissue. Okay, so hopefully this feels like a natural coordination where the pelvic floor, the abdominal strength all engage on the exhale, keeping the outer feet hugging the block. And then as we inhale, everything relaxes. Now you might notice that you have some fatigue happening in your low back, and that's not a bad thing. Your transverse abdominis, remember, it wraps all the way around to the back. So sometimes when we subtly turn this muscle on, we feel it all of a sudden in its fullness wrapping around. If this is hard for you, even just coordinating breath and muscular control, this is where you stay. Just stay right where you are, figuring this out. If you can get a little more out of this, let's go ahead and bring our knees into our chest, just rock a little bit. And then we'll bring our knees over our pelvis and our shins are parallel to the ground. So knees are at right angles. Now you can do this on the MR ball, on the big inflatable ball with just a little bit of a little bit of filling of air in the ball. You can do this in lots of different ways, but today we're just going to do it on the floor. Okay, so just notice here, just in this simple position, and then let's reach the arms overhead and notice the engagement of the rib cage a little bit. See if you can feel the stability of that transverse abdominis. Now we have to kind of hold it and hold it steady. And notice if
if fatigue happens when you hold something steady without releasing. So without that balance of release and contract, release and contract. When we just hold something statically, it can get fatigued very fast. Just notice if that's happening for you. All right, and then relax and bring your knees in. And the next action we'll do will be a little bit of movement. Okay. So you can have your arms down at your sides or over your head or out to the sides, wherever you feel most stable. And we're just going to tap. Okay, heel or toe, you decide. Heel or toe taps, and then bring that knee back up. And heel or toe tap on the other side and bring it back up. And different things will happen depending on whether you tap your toe or your heel. Notice the differences. See if you can keep your core stable. So we have to both fully engage our transverse abdominis and try to figure out how to breathe. So this is a lot to notice the stabilization that's required to hold steady. This is very different from what we just did where we were flexing and releasing. How's your breath? See if you can allow your breath to still move even though the transverse abdominis has to stay engaged. All right. And then we'll release our feet down. Windshield wiper your knees, lefty, righty. Of course, you're getting your psoas involved in the equation a little bit here. Find your breath. All right, last thing we'll do here before we get up and start moving is take your elbows next to you, fingers pointing straight up toward the sky. Bring your knees up and then bring your knees out to your finger pads. Okay, so your fingers are, right up from your elbows and our knees are going to spread out till we touch our finger pads. Bring your toes to touch. Okay, and now we're just going to do concentric circles with our toes, doing little circles in the air. We'll go both directions, so whichever way you started is fine. Our feet are mirroring each other, drawing mirrored circles. And just notice, I notice for me, my right hip doesn't function quite as well as my left hip. I notice an ease of the circling with my left where there's not as much ease in the circling of my right. What are you noticing in your body? How are you breathing? And then let's circle the other direction. And is any restriction changed or different? How are you breathing while still maintaining some stability in the core of your body? And just notice, even though this isn't a direct action on the pelvic floor is absolutely aware of what your hip joints are doing. All right, and then we'll relax. One more time, cicada wings. Let's drop the knee along the inner shin of the other leg. And just having a nice gentle movement in the hip joints. Ease through the pelvic floor. If you lost your breath along the way, find it now. And then we'll spread open to a star on the ground, reaching your limbs. Let's roll your wrists and your fingers. Exhale, draw your knees in. Let's roll to your side and come up to your hands and your knees. Find your way onto all fours. And now, since that lower part of our body is very awake, let's notice what happens when we move through some cat-cows. See if you can pay attention to how the action of anterior and posterior tilt of the pelvis impacts the pelvic floor. Can you feel your sit bones widening and a fanning out of the pelvic floor as you arch your back and anterior tilt the pelvis? And then as you posterior tilt the pelvis, can you pay attention to the sit bones moving, drawing toward each other and that natural tendency to lift the tissue out of the box? Where's the breath in all this? Does it feel good to move your spine? Does it feel good to move your pelvis? Notice now that we're no longer statically holding, but we're recommitting to that mobility of the breath. Feel the full spine. Yes, we're kind of focused on the pelvis a little bit today, but try not to let any other part of the spine get stuck. Notice how the shoulders and shoulder blades and ribs support the neck. And then after a few rounds of that, wag your tail. And maybe your feet want to swish from side to side. Nice, good tail wagging. Just freeing up your pelvis a little bit. Let your ribs move side to side like a nice little wiggle. And then we'll put our paintbrush on our tailbone and do some big circles with our pelvis. So imagine a brush on your tailbone that's sticking straight out toward the wall behind you, and draw a circle on the wall behind you with your paintbrush. How is your breath? Let's not forget that the breath and the pelvis are deeply interconnected. Circle the other way. And you might notice that the circle that originates in the pelvis is transmitting a spiral circling in your ribs and in your head. Think less, just let your body spiral itself open. How's your breath? And then drop back toward a child's pose and settle here for a moment. Find your shoulders, open up your ribs, walk your fingers forward. And then we'll find some length, walking the hands over to one side of the mat and open up the rib cage. Big breaths. Full inhale, full exhale. And then we'll go to the other side. And can we notice as our ribs open and our diaphragm opens, can you feel the belly expand? Can you feel the pelvic floor expand? Filling up that balloon, your whole container. And then come back to center, up onto all fours. Let's twist, arm up in the air. Give your hands some movement if you'd like. Drop that shoulder down, twisting the spine. And now notice when there's a little compression on the containers, both especially up at the diaphragm, that top of the container, but the sides too. Notice what the breath is doing. Notice what it's not doing. Sometimes some pressure on the container is a really nice feeling. Twist can feel really good with the breath sometimes. Reach that arm up and let's switch sides. Bring the hand in the air. If you want a little movement of your hand, go for it, and then drop that shoulder down. Notice the spinal column, notice the breath. Even within the restriction, is there mobility? And then we'll reach that arm back up in the air. Hand comes down. Let's take our time. Find your way to a dog pose. Take a little time to move around here. Get your whole body to be in your posture. Pedaling your feet, feeling your hands on the ground, moving your jaw around, moving your head around, your hips, anything that wants to kind of invite itself into some movement. And then we'll walk our feet forward and come to Uttanasana, forward fold. Release tension from your head. A halfway lift, opening up through the spine, extend and broaden. And then we'll exhale and fold again. One more time, halfway lift, sit bones high, heart is forward. Exhale and release. Push through your feet, rising up. Bring the arms up to the sky. Let's cactus open our chest, expand your wings, open your heart, exhale and round in. Pause here for a moment and find your breath. In this different plane where we're now standing, can we sense the fullness of our pelvic floor movement?
the fullness of our diaphragm moving. That container of the torso, where the transverse abdominis that wraps around you like a corset, can it both free itself up and open on the in-breath and condense and feel that support on the exhale. So see if you can just close your eyes and dance inside your breath for a moment. The top and bottom, the diaphragm and the pelvic floor dropping down and wide on the inhale. And then drawing back in and up on the exhale. The sides of your container widening out 360 on your in-breath. And then shrinking like a shrinky dink on your exhale. So can you find all of these parts of you mobilizing with the breath? Nothing is stuck. The movement is the key. As your pelvic floor releases, can you let that give the knees and the soles of the feet a cue that they also can have some pliability and mobility, that nothing has to be stuck? Doesn't mean we have to actually move, but our joint spaces can be free and available. Can you feel it travel upward through your spine and through your shoulders and even into your neck? The sense of availability, suppleness, mobility. Can your body breathe? Let's bring that fullness of our breath now into vinyasa. So we'll allow ourselves to both feel that sense of effort and surrender. Okay. Take a deep breath in, arms up to the sky. Exhale, fold forward. Release your head. Inhale, a halfway lift. Open up all those chambers. Exhale, folding forward. Inhale, step back to a dog. Exhale, stay here, yield. Inhale, forward into a plank. Exhale, knees to the ground, find the earth. Inhale, a cobra. Exhale, surrender. Let's repeat that. Inhale for a cobra. Exhale, relaxing down. Inhale, back to a dog. Exhale while you're there. Mobility of breath. Inhale forward with your feet. Exhale, release down. Inhale, push through your feet, rising. Exhale, relax down. Hands to your heart or at your sides. Now we're gonna repeat this, and your breath is different from my breath, so you might be going at a slightly different pace, and don't rush to meet me. Don't slow down to meet me. Just you do you. But in this next, we're going to do the exact same thing we just did. And when we do this, try to sense that feeling of the breath and the movement of the body in relationship to the breath, that sense of fluidity, that everything's moving as we go. Okay. And maybe I just won't talk you through it. I will, just in case you forget. Take a deep breath in, arms up to the sky. You take your pace, exhale, floating forward. Notice the movement in your body. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, release, back down. Inhale, back to a dog. Exhale, stay. Inhale, plank. Exhale, come to the ground. Inhale, cobra.
Exhale, release. Again, inhale, cobra. Exhale, release. Curl the toes under, inhale, dog. Exhale, stay. Inhale, half lift. Exhale, Uttanasana. Inhale, rise. Exhale, hands to your heart or down at your sides. Notice what breath and movement do for your mind, for your well-being, for your sense of embodiment. Feel all the mobility as you breathe here. Close your eyes. Feel the diaphragm, pelvic floor, and transverse abdominis move with the breath. Notice the response of the knees and the feet and the shoulders and the spine. Nothing's gripped, but nothing's not active either. That you engage when you need and you release when you need. It's the effort and the surrender. It's the balancing of engagement and release that keeps us supple, available, strong, stable. Inhale, arms up to the sky. Let's float forward. A halfway lift, breathe in. Exhale, step your left foot back, come to a lunge. Ground yourself. Start to move. We'll straighten that front leg out a little bit and then bend it. Don't lose sight of your breath. We've done all this beautiful work to awaken into our breathing pattern and our strength and release pattern. See if you can keep that pattern alive as you move. And then ground yourself in your lunge. Push through your feet, rising up, crescent lunge. Full breaths here. Do you feel your stabilizing forces and your ability to breathe continuing? And release down, back foot forward. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, switch sides. Come to a lunge this side. Ground yourself. Start to move when you're ready. We'll bend and straighten through the front leg. Be mindful of your spine staying long, the hips square. Keep your breath moving and notice the interplay of your muscular strength, both ebbing and flowing. Now ground yourself. As you push into the ground, do you notice your pelvic floor? Is it alive and aware and awake and supporting you? Inhale, rise up, bring the arms to the sky. So even though we need our core and our pelvic floor to stabilize us here, is there still a little ebb and flow when we move, when our diaphragm moves? Do we still feel that we can have a little bit of contraction and release through the pelvic floor and transverse abdominis, even though there's a lot of strength and support required? Let the exhales recommit you to the strength. All right, we'll release the hands down back to a dog pose. Find your breath. We'll come forward into a plank, holding some stability here now, a very challenging pose for knowing what our diaphragm can do. So now, even though our transverse abdominis has to stay engaged, can you still feel your diaphragm move, billowing out to the sides now? Is there still slight movement in the pelvic floor? Recommit to your strength on the exhales. Find your way down to the ground. Knees first if you need it. Take your arms out wide, palms on the ground. Extend your front body. Breathe. And exhale. And relax. Push up on tall fours. Give your spine some movement. Any kind of movement it wants to have. Curl the toes under. How's your breath? Find your way to a dog. When you feel ready, bring your feet forward, Uttanasana. Notice your breath. Inhale for a halfway. Relax again. Push through the feet, rising up. And then trace down through the center. One more time, hands at your sides or hands to your heart. And can you sense the diaphragmatic movement, the belly movement, the pelvic floor movement, all on the breath? Inhale, we get broad and wide. Exhale, we condense. Lift your tissue on the exhale. Sometimes we can get so caught up with the grip that we forget to let go. So notice if the transition from exhale to inhale is challenging to you. And take your feet wide apart, and we'll come down to a deep squat. Maybe a little bit of movement in your legs here if that feels good. And we'll come all the way up to standing star. Exhale and drop down. We'll just do a couple of movements here and then we'll stay. So drop toward a goddess and back up again. All right, now as we come down, find a self-supported place. So you don't have to go into your deepest squat. Lift your chest. Find the mobility of your breath. Find the stability of your pelvic floor connected to your legs. Is there still the opportunity, even though our pelvic floor and our legs are supporting us, our core is supporting us, is there still a little bit of movement as we breathe? Even that subtle little surrender and then re-engagement can help strengthen instead of weaken our capacities. Inhale, standing star. Turn your feet forward, wide-legged forward fold. You can put your arms forward or underneath you, whatever feels best. Notice your breath here. Notice what the pelvic floor is doing on the breath here. And then turn back to the front of your mat. A dog pose one last time. And then we'll find our way down to a child's pose. Relax here. Put your knees wherever you want them, close, far, wherever's comfy. And as there's compression of your thighs against your body, it's a little easier to pay attention and notice the movement of your abdominal wall as the transverse abdominis moves. You can feel the movement of your pelvic floor, feel the movement of your diaphragm. All right, and then as we come out of there, let's come to our back for Shavasana. And as you lie down, take support in any way you need. And let's give ourselves as an opportunity to feel this pattern of breath one more time as we move into Shavasana. So have your arms and legs comfortable, whatever that means to you. And see what it feels like to notice the movement of breath in your body. How we accommodate our breath by expanding on our inhale, not just our lungs and our ribs, but our abdomen, our low back, our pelvic floor. And as we exhale, there's like a condensement. We don't have to engage anymore. There's nothing to support here strength wise. So our pelvic floor and our core don't have to do work right now. They just get to expand and condense. Expand and condense. And as you settle into that feeling on the breath of expansion on the inhale and condensement on the exhale, see if you can let it expand into your whole body, that you almost imagine your whole body expanding, maybe even your fingers curl open on the in-breath and then slightly curl toward each other on the out-breath. Maybe your throat opens a little more on the inhale and softens on the exhale. See if your whole body can be like an amoeba that moves just a little bit with that cellular respiration, as if your whole body was one cell, expanding and condensing. Imagine you are just one cell that breathes. Let's begin to move again. Breathe again. If you lost sight of it, bring it into its fullness. Just very slowly start to make the both physical and mental transition out of Shavasana. Taking your time, moving very slowly. And as you find your way, once you get seated, no rush to get there. But when you do come upright, prop yourself well so that you're comfortable in your posture. And then notice if there's just a little bit more mobility in your diaphragm, in your belly, in your pelvic floor, if there's just a little more suppleness of movement. And the more free we become, the more mobile we become, the better. Can't think of a single thing that feeling free in the body doesn't serve. Okay. To whatever benefit of your practice, let's share our energy. Bring your hands together and offer your merits, your efforts, your energy. Namaste. Thank you, everyone.